If you already saw the title, you may be a bit conflicted. Why did I say that Intel is better than AMD? As in this video, I'm going to explain that. And for whoever doesn't know what I'm talking about, AMD and Intel are very, very big CPU companies. They both manufacture CPUs, also other stuff, but they do a lot of their produce comes from and profits comes from CPUs, and they are two very big competitors. Apple also makes CPUs and computers and all that thing, but we're not going to consider them because Apple are considered sort of something else, like their different ecosystem and whatever. As let's focus now on AMD and Intel. As why would I say that Intel is better? If we look at these leaked stuff about the Intel 12th generation CPUs, you can see on the benchmark that their performance is 1,000 more than all of the other AMD CPUs. As if you look at the Intel i5, i7, and i9, they're 1,000 points more than the Ryzen 9, Ryzen, and the other Ryzen 9, and the Ryzen 7. As what is going on here? Intel are releasing their 12th gen CPUs, and for what we understand, these stuff here quite accurate. They may not be completely accurate, and they may be completely false, but this is what we know for now. And if we go a bit down, we can see all the stuff about them. We can see the Intel Core i9 is going to have 16 threads, the Intel Core i7 would have 12 threads, and the Intel Core i5 would have 10 threads. We can see all their boosts, and we can see that how much they can go up, their maximum gigahertz, and more, their cache, and their power consumption here. We can see what power consumption, okay? As if we see that, we can see that now Intel is better than AMD. As why does this interest us? As what's going on here? It seems like up to now there was a point that Intel was the best CPU maker. There was also times where AMD was the better CPU maker, but for a long time Intel has been holding that title, okay? And it seems like Intel was slacking, and then it seems like AMD were completely beating them. But now Intel, it seems, are putting themselves back straight, and now that with their new CEO, it seems like they're doing really well and choosing very good decisions. As you can see, it seems like their new CPUs are going to be fantastic. Also, another thing to note, their new graphics cards. It seems like AMD and Intel are not only competing with their new CPUs that seem absolutely amazing, and it seems like Intel are getting themselves together and getting really, really good and starting to really beat off their competitors. I need to understand, even when people said, oh, you know, Intel's losing against AMD, they weren't losing. We're still talking about here a multi-billion-dollar company. They isn't going to just disappear in a day. Probably. Could, probably not. But if we look now what Intel did, they released their new Arc graphics cards. They're going to be probably fantastic. They say that they're going to be competing with all of Nvidia's Ryzen, with the Ryzen lineup, and with AMD's lineup of graphics cards. As it seems, Intel are getting themselves together, and with these new graphics cards, if they're actually competitive and really good, and they start or maybe outperforming even the AMD and Nvidia graphics cards, it seems like Intel are getting themselves a really good deal here with the best CPU and best graphics cards in the market, and maybe they'll take out a motherboard and all the other components, as we'll maybe have a full Intel build. That will be really interesting, but that's not still happening. For now, they're just making now, it seems like, graphics cards and CPUs. Obviously, they make other stuff, but these are these main stuff that we're going to be talking about. But it seems like Intel are really getting themselves together, and we're getting now to a point that it seems like instead of Intel beating AMD for a ton amount of time, or AMD beating Intel, it seems like they're getting to a point that AMD beats Intel, then Intel beats AMD, and then it goes back and forwards really, really fast, and that's better for us, for the consumer. The more they do that, the more the prices may even go down, the more the products will get better, and all of those stuff, and that's better for us as the buyer, as that there's not that much competition in the CPU market, and there's not a lot making these companies need to put out a better CPU. But if they're competing a lot against each other, as then they would have to take out the better CPU to obviously get the biggest margin of the market of CPU buyers. And now we're going to just have to wait and see how this plays out, and maybe it will play out to a point that's just AMD at the front, Intel at the front, AMD at the front, Intel at the front, each one taking out a better CPU and a better CPU one after the other. That may happen, but we still don't know what the future brings us. Still, please like and subscribe to this video. That will really help the channel. Also, go and subscribe to my other channel in Hebrew if you want. That will be also very helpful. Thank you and goodbye.